You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hello, Jack.
Hey, Len. How you doing?
Pretty well. How are you?
I'm good, but it's a sad day to learn that Bill Fenwick died yesterday.
I know. I really didn't know that he was in trouble. What was his problem toward the end?
Well, I mean, we should talk about him for a little while because I've always thought there should be kind of like a more public tribute. They did kind of an internal law firm tribute, and that's what I sent you the links to. I think they're going to eventually open it up to be a more client-oriented tribute. But generally speaking, I know he lost mobility. I know that what happened, he became sort of a little bit housebound. And I know he had problems for many years with his knees. I know he shifted initially to riding a bike. He stopped walking. He was riding a bike, then he stopped riding a bike. And I don't know what
life-threatening.
Yeah, I don't think any of that was life-threatening. I don't know exactly what ultimately did him in, because he was a pretty health-oriented guy. And my favorite story about him is that when I started working at what was then Davis, Stafford, Kellman, and Fenwick, that was the original name, he said to me, "Why don't you work out with me?" And we used to get up early in the morning, like 5 a.m., and go to this weightlifting place to lift weights together. And we did that, I want to say, at least 3 days a week, maybe sometimes even 4 or 5 days a week. And we would travel together for cases in Chicago and New York and elsewhere. And he would keep that regimen. He would find the gym that was open at 5 a.m. and he would say, "Come on, get up. You got to keep yourself in good health. That's part of the diligence you have to do. If you're going to have a sharp mind, you need to have it in a sharp body." And so he was a big inspiration to me, not only intellectually, but also sort of physical fitness wise. And so, I thought he took care of himself fundamentally.
A memory that I have of him when he asked to take this case for me.
Right.
I didn't even realize there was a case to be made, but he recognized in his mind the violation of the Privacy Act of 1974 that he defended and wrote.
Right. Right. He wanted to shift from computer issues to privacy issues. He sort of foresaw the fact that this computer digital transformation was going to have major inroads. And, today there's a woman on Capitol Hill who's testifying against Facebook about how much privacy violations occur and how much manipulation occurs of even kids on Facebook, and how much knowledge there is of sort of the addiction that Facebook imposes. And of course, Facebook is pushing back saying, "Hey, we're not big tobacco. This is not a harmful drug." But the analogy that's being used is it's addictive, kind of like nicotine and smoking, that Facebook, particularly for, I guess, young girls, and Instagram can become quite addictive, and people sort of measure themselves against how they look on Facebook. But Bill, to some degree, foresaw all of the likely privacy inroads that would happen. And so I'm sure he saw your case sort of in a more futuristic light than most other lawyers would. And I'm sure that's what drove him to take that case and to say, wait a minute, this is not so simple. The government can't do what it's trying to do here.
Well, so to continue the story, early in his prosecution of the case, there was a meeting held at the NIH in Bethesda, Maryland.
Right.
That was organized to allegedly find a replacement for WI-38.
Right.
And because the rumor was spread that those would not be available for a meaningful period of time, which was an outright lie.
Right.
They're available even to this day, and they will be for the next century for reasons I won't go into now, but I think you know the story.
Right.
In any case, that meeting was very important to both of us. And he said, we will go to Washington. And we, or he, I don't remember how it happened, rented a hotel room. We roomed together for that night. And at about 6 o'clock in the morning, I saw him on the floor doing push-ups.
Right. That's him. Yeah. He knew how to save money too. I mean, he didn't mind, he was from Tennessee. I mean, he comes from a very poor family.
Well, I remember one thing he said to me when
Ed Gregorian?
No, the president who was from Georgia.
Oh, Jimmy Carter. The peanut farmer. Right.
Was elected. He said to me, you just wait. This fellow is going to be one of our greatest presidents.
Right. Well, he was from the South, so he did a lot of blue collar work. I mean, I sort of bonded with him because I told him I grew up in a blue collar family and I worked from age 6 and I didn't mind doing hard work. And he really enjoyed hearing the stories of my sort of young start of work from age 6 in my dad's grocery store, my dad and mom's grocery store in Brooklyn. And, he grew up sort of in a poor family where he had to go to work pretty young. And, he is the ultimate American success story because he did make his way both to college at a time when I think a lot of people from his family would never have gone to college, and then to get into law school and to do well in law school such that he got first year employment at a big white shoe Wall Street law firm. Cleary Gottlieb was one of the, and still is, one of the top 10 law firms in New York. And that really launched his ability to meet all these other guys that said, hey, why don't we move west? Blake Stafford had gone to Stanford, so he knew Palo Alto. And so Don Davis was there. So this group of guys all split off from Cleary Gottlieb almost at the same time. I think they did offer Cleary Gottlieb that they would, if Cleary wanted, open the West Coast office of Cleary. And I think Cleary said, no, we're not ready for that yet. So do whatever you want to do. You have our blessing. But the funny story that I think is very public now is at the time that they decided to go to Palo Alto, they had seen a specially commissioned report that Cleary Gottlieb had done with one of the consulting firms, Arthur Little or Arthur Young or whatever one of those firms were back then. And they spent some big bucks back, we're talking when $50,000 was a lot of money 50 years ago. And in the report, it said one of the number one places to go is near Stanford University because the universities are going to kick off a lot of entrepreneurs. So it said you can go to Research Triangle in North Carolina. You can go to Palo Alto, to Stanford. It identified these research universities, like a dozen of them, in different parts of the country, and said, look, if you're going to open an office, don't just open an office like in, Paris or Brussels. Open an office in different regions of the U.S. that are suburbs of major cities, but where there are big research universities, because those business schools and those law schools are going to kick out entrepreneurs and talent. So you have both sides of it, the client and the talent. And so they latched on to Palo Alto when Cleary Gottlieb was not ready to sort of pull the trigger. And even to this day, I don't think Cleary has ever opened the West Coast office. I think they're still very much a New York and maybe DC law firm. So he stayed friendly with them, and we would get referrals from them, and we would refer cases to them and clients to them as well. But there's really a good story there because in some ways, Cleary could have had a pretty significant West Coast presence had they said, hey, open this for us and we'll finance you and we'll all work together, they decided not to pull the trigger. So Davis and Stafford came out first, and then Fenwick followed maybe about a year later. And then ultimately there was a bunch of other changes that resulted in the name change of the firm. But, the firm grew while I was there. I was like lawyer number 10 or 11. We grew while I was there to like 150. And then after I left, I think they grew at the height to like 450. I don't know where they are now. I just looked today to see if I could find the answer. And I looked on sort of LinkedIn just to see whether they've even updated, because now your digital life continues. So here on LinkedIn is Bill Fenwick's profile. And of course, it doesn't say anything about his passing. I guess someone would have to get the password and sort of update it. But, it does list various things he did. And he was with Fenwick and West, according to this, for 49 years and 8 months. In 4 months, it would have been 50 years. It said he started in March of 73. I'm not sure if that's exactly right, or if that's when the firm actually changed its name, because I thought the firm started in 72, and I see at the bottom it says March of 72 in Mountain View. The firm left Palo Alto because it couldn't find space, and it's got Cleary Gottlieb. I mean, here it is. Here's Cleary Gottlieb. He was an associate from June of 67 to March of 73, so almost 6 years. And his Vanderbilt education was 64 to 67. And he went to Southern Illinois University and got a BS in business administration from 1960 to 1964, graduated with honors. He graduated with honors at Vanderbilt too. That's what Order of the Coif means. So it's pretty obvious that he had quite a career that lasted. Very few lawyers get to 50 years in practice, in California at least. Maybe in New York it's different, but he certainly was in practice for more than 50 years, because he spent nearly 6 years at Cleary Gottlieb as well. So a really long and distinguished career, both in the California bar as well as the New York bar. So it's quite a statement to see that kind of success in a way.
Well, I want to go back to what you said at the outset of your statements, and that is that the three of us were born and raised under poor circumstances.
Right.
I was born the year before the crash of 1929, and my entire childhood up until the time of the Second World War was to be raised in a depression.
Right.
My parents had no money to send me to university, which is where I wanted to go. And I joined the Army in order to get the GI Bill in 1946. And that's how I got through the University of Pennsylvania. Then I went to work for a year and raised enough money along with the GI Bill to get through the University of Pennsylvania, and then won a scholarship to get through my master and PhD program. Meantime, my father's partnership with someone in a dental business, failed, and we lived on my $75 a month income from the GI Bill for a year.
Wow.
Well, my father and I built a new dental laboratory for him in Philadelphia. He was an expert in that field, and he had a following of dentists who relied on his expertise for the construction of dental partials.
Right.
I ran that business. I built the business, physically built the business with a friend of mine, and then ran it because I had a one-year course in accounting at Penn, at the Wharton School. And so I had primitive knowledge of accounting.
Was your dad also a dentist too, or was he more just the designer or manufacturer of the appliance?
My father's family were poor. They owned a dairy store in South Philadelphia, in the Italian neighborhood, by the way, which is a terrific neighborhood.
Right, I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm.
So my father and his brother ran the milk wagon. They got up at 4:00 in the morning to load the milk cans onto the horse-driven, vehicle that they were using to deliver milk in the neighborhood. He didn't graduate high school. He had to leave school at the 9th grade, so he wasn't an educated man. And through a series of events that I won't go into, he ended up being hired by a startup dental laboratory in Philadelphia, where he went from errand boy to become one of the leading experts, if not the leading expert in Philadelphia, as a designer of these extremely complicated dental appliances, especially for people with an overjet. In other words, a mouth that looks like this.
Right.
And you have to make what's called an open bite case in order to correct that problem. He was expert at that and a number of other things. He even made the appliance for Albert Einstein.
Wow.
And in return, he asked if Einstein would sign a book for him. Einstein agreed, and I have that book with Einstein's signature.
Wow, that's pretty valuable. You know what the small world thing is that's sort of funny coincidence? I was at the dentist today, essentially looking at how modern these dental offices have become. They've all got like video and you see the x-rays instantly. And you see inside your mouth in full color, 3 dimensions. They show you, what they're going to do in advance of doing it. They document it. I mean, it's just a really high-tech practice. And, years ago, I think the dentist was pretty much resigned to various standard dental tools. And your father was probably one of the major innovators in helping people that have lost their teeth, right? Lost some of their teeth.
I worked in his lab for many years back in the 30s and 40s, so I know a lot about dentistry. You didn't see is in the materials used today as compared to the materials used back in the 40s.
Right.
That's really profound. But yeah, I know exactly what you saw.
Right. I mean, to me, it's a funny coincidence that I was there this morning and I was thinking to myself, man, you have to have a lot of capital to open up a dental office these days. There's probably like $500,000 worth of equipment in this.
Well, let me tell you how that's done. It's not a big deal because the way it's done is that the dental supply houses will advance the money to any startup dentist and build his office as you saw it in return for the dentist's business for the next decade. And that's how it's done.
Okay. Interesting. So it's like an interesting sort of relationship that gets cemented by, years ago when you opened the grocery store, the people that sold you the Pepsi and the Coke would buy the refrigeration for you so long as you put the Pepsi and the Coke into those refrigerators, right? So they were sort of buying shelf space, right? That's really what they were doing.
Same idea. Doing that.
Yeah, I had a case I had to try last month, and then I had a second case right behind it that I thought we were going to be in trial essentially this month. And literally on the first day of trial, the case settled. And so what was blocked out is 3 weeks of trial in October in California. It got scratched. So Lee's mom, she's now sort of at the end of life. She's 91 as well. So we're sort of in vigil with her now. And of course, I have to tell you, the one thing that happens when you see all of these people coming to the end of life and you hear things like Bill Fenwick, who I always thought of as the picture of health, dying at 83, 84, I guess. He just had a birthday. I think his 84th birthday just happened, something like that, or maybe 83rd birthday. It kind of surprises you, but to live in your 80s is actually a blessing in a way, because a lot of people do still die in their 70s and many in their 60s as well, right? I mean,
life expectancy in this country is 79 for everybody. It's
right.
About 76 for men and 82 for women.
Right.
So the average is
right. So he sort of, you would say, he outdistanced most of the pack and probably
he lived 3 or 4 years beyond the expectancy for his cohort.
Right. And he worked, he had a long work span. I think he retired, quote, retired. I think he was still technically of counsel. I think he sort of retired more or less just 2 years ago.
When you were back in California, or maybe recently, do you have any news about Wally?
Yeah, so I couldn't, when I was trying that case in San Jose last month, I didn't get a chance to visit with Wally. I was actually living out of a hotel in San Jose and working like 14 hours a day. And so I didn't actually visit with him, but they had a big bash and I saw some photographs of it. I could send them to you. There was a wedding party and Wally looked pretty good. I mean, Wally looked pretty good in the wedding. The pictures looked great. They had a big party for his grandson who got married. Actually, it's a guy that used to work at my firm for a couple of years as a paralegal trainee. And Dana's youngest son, I think it's her youngest son, got married. He didn't really want to do law stuff. He wanted to be a musician, which is what I think he is. He's in a band. And I guess the band played at his wedding party. So, yeah, it was a big celebration. But he looked good in the pictures, and they had a great party, and they had sort of a great day. So all the grandkids are starting to get married, and he's sort of witnessing. And I guess he's a great grandfather already to 2 or 3 different children of various marriages that have occurred.
He doesn't communicate by email anymore.
I think he's given up on typing, and I don't think he uses the voice recognition stuff, even though it's on his computer. It's interesting because the same thing was true with Bill Fenwick. At some point, he just stopped replying to emails. So maybe there's something at some point that kicks in where you just sort of, your cognitive load is such that you just don't want to be bothered. And that's where I think this voice recognition stuff, if it ever takes hold, can actually help in a big way. Whether it will or not is.
I've had the experience in recent years with colleagues and friends with whom I was very close, who did exactly as you described. They stopped communicating.
Right.
And within several months or years, I learned they died.
Right.
And there was no goodbye, no nothing, no contact at all during the last stages of their lives. Very sad.
I think there's just a gradual disengagement cognitively that plays on. I saw it.
I don't understand that. I really don't.
Well, I saw it with my mom, Len. What happened is she would routinely look at all of her bank statements. This is just an ordinary savings account. She would look at, and checking account, she would look at those accounts, those monthly statements. She knew the date that they typically came in. If it didn't come in by the 6th or 7th day after the month closed, she would call the bank and say, I didn't get my statement. They'd tell her to go online. She'd say, I don't have a computer. I don't want to go online. I wanted my postal statements. And they would remail the postal statements to her. And, basically she would look line by line through them to see whether it all added up. And she balanced her own checkbook. And then about 3 months ago, I'd say that all stopped. There was no interest. There was zero interest in looking at those accounts. You'd bring her the mail and she really wouldn't care. She wouldn't be that interested. She would be
But
like,
she still communicated with you.
right. No, she could talk, but a lot of the talk was, end of life kind of talk, which is, can you help me accelerate my end of life? I'm not happy. I'm not really eating much anymore. She lost her appetite.
Yeah, well, quality of life disappears.
Yeah, the quality of life. And she didn't even want to watch TV, even that one way. She used to have the TV on almost 7/24, literally. And that just completely disappeared. There was just no interest at all. So, that cognitive disengagement, I think, is a real signal that the end is near, right? And I think that happened to Bill. You didn't see him respond to emails. You didn't see him show any interest. I know I invited him to a few things, and he said, yeah, I'm not really up to committing to it. Maybe call me before it happens. I invited him to a few things, a few different online things. He didn't show any interest in it at all.
Yeah.
So it's quite sad in a way, but maybe everyone goes in their own different way, right?
Well, yeah, but there seems to be some similarities, like what we are now discussing, and I have the impression that the body seems to turn off toward the very end, that organ systems begin to shut down.
Right.
If the death is not a sudden death.
Right. Yeah, the mechanism is not well known, but there's some sort of set of signaling activities that seem to have a domino effect, right?
There must be a lot known, and I don't follow the field, but it's a big field. It's called, it even has a name, it's called thanatology.
With a T?
THAN, than, ATOLOGY, I believe, thanatology.
Okay.
And I believe there are journals and certainly researchers, so there must be a lot known about those final hours, but I'm not in that field, not really interested in it, so I can't speak to it.
Right. Yeah, they did. Did you get to see any of the videos of the tribute that they put together? I mean, I guess they knew he was not well, and they reached out to various people that work with Bill.
I saw some of it. It was very impressive.
And they said, press this button, you can video yourself and make a statement. Of course, everyone has a different style. Some people wrote a script and were reading from a script, and some people had the script. And I just contemporaneously started talking on the video, remembering different things that happened with him. And I'm sure I violated whatever their time limit was. I said, try to keep it to only 2 minutes, because people get bored after a while. But there's so many stories, right?
I remember being stunned when I learned about the death many years later of Ed Gregorian. He was a young guy, vital. He was, Bill had anointed him to run the litigation against the feds in that case.
Right.
Early on, so I knew Ed very well. He was a terrific guy. I really respected him. And I was stunned when I learned such a young man had died.
Right. I think he had some sort of brain tumor or something, very sudden kind of death. I was surprised too. He became the partner in charge of the whole litigation group. I mean, as the firm got bigger, there was a corporate group, a litigation group, a tax group, became like organized by groups. And he was in charge of the litigation group. And what I most remember about Ed, besides doing some really great cases with him, including one in Boston that at some point I'll do a podcast on it because it's such a funny story. The original spreadsheet company, VisiCorp, went up against the supplier of the software Arts, the guys who actually engineered it. VisiCorp was the marketing, quote, publisher of the software. They used the book publishing agreement as the form that they signed for the software distribution. It's quite a funny story. They had no money and they didn't want to spend money on lawyers.
I thought the inventor of the spreadsheet, I can't think of his name now.
Bricklin and Frankston.
No.
It was two guys. Yeah, it was two guys.
The guy who gave his name to the spreadsheet, it was known by this guy's name.
VisiCalc?
What?
The product name, the first spreadsheet on a personal computer was called VisiCalc.
On a personal computer, but he invented it years earlier.
Oh, for the mainframe? For mainframe?
Yeah,
Okay.
but he was well known, and then it became part of an ordinary computer, PC.
Right. It's possible. It's certainly possible. I think it's likely that the product existed on a mainframe before Bricklin and Frankston, who are the two guys that formed Software Arts.
I wish I could think of his name, but I remember that story vividly.
It was probably a mainframe computer spreadsheet, right?
Oh, I don't believe so, because it was sold on the market. People were buying it. It was like magic, the spreadsheet, when it first came out.
Yeah, no, it clearly is what made Apple Computer was that spreadsheet.
Maybe you can pick it up on your computer. I don't have the capability, but if you can look up the history of the spreadsheet.
Well, I just did, and what came up is a little different than what we're talking about. I'll put it on the screen because the microcomputer spreadsheet, this is the article that comes up that was published, called The History of Microcomputer Spreadsheets by a guy named Daniel Power, talking about it in 1978. And they're talking about VisiCalc, and then VisiCalc was eclipsed by Lotus 123.
Lotus 123.
And then Microsoft came out with Excel, and Excel.
What about? I think it was Lotus. The guy who I remember, Dan Bricklin
and Bob Frankston, right? Mm-hmm.
No, but neither of them. There's another guy.
Yeah, I think there was some guy that did it on a mini computer, not a personal computer, right?
Possibly. And his name was given to the software.
I mean, here's a reference to in 1964, Richard Matisic, a professor at UC Berkeley, published important concepts developing computerized spreadsheets for business accounting.
I don't know that name.
Right, I don't either. And it doesn't, without a doubt, Bricklin and Frankston were working from whatever they found. It wasn't like they were accounting experts at all. I mean, they're smart engineering guys.
Maybe you could look up that 123. What was it called?
Lotus 123 was by.
Look up Lotus 123. See what name comes up.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, so to me, Apple should really establish a chair at MIT for Bricklin or Harvard or both for Bricklin and Frankston, because they wouldn't be anywhere near where they are now. So I'm going to look up Lotus 123, because that was actually a product that was done by, here's the Wikipedia, by a guy that used to work for VisiCorp. There was a guy, he's actually still around, and he's supporting a lot of nonprofit work at the electronic freedom frontier, Mitch Kapoor, Kapor. He was actually employed by VisiCorp to do some graphing software, which is what
Mitch
Kapoor, yeah. And Mitch got some funding from a New York VC, who may still be alive, in fact. And he filled the gap that existed because there was not an IBM version of VisiCalc. They were still working on the IBM version. So, Lotus was able to enter the market pretty rapidly and pretty successfully. But then Microsoft kind of trumped them, and everyone's wondering, when does Microsoft get trumped, right? Excel's been on the market for a very long period of time and been very successful.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like anyone is even trying to trump them. Like, you don't even hear about competitive products coming on the market. You just don't even hear about it. It's sort of like you've got a monopoly in a spreadsheet, and they're not going to lose it anytime soon.
I remember those early days when I was at Stanford. I used to go every year to the computer show in San Francisco.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I don't remember the guy's name who organized it. I'm not remembering proper names easily. Yeah. But anyhow, he used to go through that floor on roller skates.
Right.
Did you ever go to those?
Yeah. I went to a few of them. He was kind of a popular kind of hippie kind of guy, and a lot of these people.
I remember distinctly a guy who, again, I don't know his name. He was one of the first, maybe almost the first guy who went on the World Wide Web.
Right.
And he was bragging. I remember there was a video that he made. He was bragging about how he could connect with certain people around the world. It was just amazing what he said about what he called then the World Wide Web.
Right. I mean, the other interesting thing to connect with Bill Fenwick is Bill Fenwick was the personal lawyer for Steve Jobs. And of course, Steve Jobs' 10th anniversary of his death will happen, I think, on October 8th. So Bill died literally just a few days before the 10th anniversary of Steve Jobs' death. And Steve Jobs got much valuable personal counsel from Bill Fenwick on many issues. I mean, not just business issues, many personal issues, many.
Is that noted in the book, the biography of Jobs?
I think they touch on it, but they don't go into it in any detail. And of course, Bill kept everything secret, even stuff that really became public. He was a very ethical guy.
Very careful about that.
Yeah, he was very careful about privacy and confidentiality. And
when Meredith Wadman, the author of that book about my work, found out from me about Bill Fenwick's role, she wanted to speak to him.
Yeah.
At that time, I was cooperating without question with her.
Right.
And I trusted her. Of course, I later learned that she didn't tell the truth in that book. But anyhow, she wanted to talk to Bill, and I gave her Bill's phone number.
Right.
One day I get a call from Bill, and he says, Len, this woman, Meredith Wadman, wants to talk to me.
Right.
Do I have your permission?
Right.
And that was typical of the way he behaved was really terrific.
Yeah, he took confidentiality very seriously. He took, the oath very seriously as an officer of the court. He was a very honorable guy. He treated ethics as they should be treated, and he had a general attitude towards mentorship that is unfortunately sort of dissipating in today's world. Many senior lawyers just feel like they're too busy to be bothered, but he was a big believer in mentorship and making sure that lawyers got the chance to learn in the line of fire. I certainly learned a lot in the line of fire in various cases with him. And, I have to say, I think that's unfortunately disappearing. A lot of people just don't want to be bothered training people or even spending the time doing anything with them. They sort of treat it like, I really can't be bothered by you. But he took a quite different view. And I have to say, he was an important mentor to me. I'm sure an important mentor to hundreds of lawyers over a very lengthy period of time. There's no question about that.
Tune in next time on the Valley Current.